The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
And welcome back now. It's time for the Sunday Mannin line. I'm Roger Watterson. On our switch is Catherine Nichol, and we're here to talk to you about any topic of your choice today. It's a completely open forum, so you can telephone us on 66 13 68. You can also text to 166 177, or you can email us at studio@manxradio.com. And we would like to talk to you about whatever you want, really. Our earlier programme was talking about public service broadcasting, and this, of course, in Manx Radio's 50th year. It's been at it a long time, Manx Radio, and it's over the years seen many changes and many changes in requirements, but we're here still providing it. So we'd like you to tell us what you think about public service broadcasting, what you would like to see done if that isn't done, what you'd like to see more of, that is hear more of, I should say. In other words, let us have your views about public service broadcasting and how you see it. 66 13 68, please. That is the number. And we have no studio guests, so it's entirely an open forum today. One or two texts and emails have already come in as a result of the actual programme. In the Sunday Opinion, we used a clip from the archives where Richard Ronan was closing his speech to Tynwald, and he said that Manx Radio will still be necessary in 50 years' time. And Donald wants to know how he can say that, because he doesn't know what technology will bring in 10 years, let alone 50 years. Well, I think you're probably right there, David, but it's not just the technology, it's on the move all the time, but it's what's needed, the service and the reasons why it should happen. And now, let's see what else we got before we go to our first ad break. Great stuff, but I don't know who this is, there's no name on it. Where's the £1 million coming from? We haven't got the money. Okay, we got money for all sorts, I suppose. But it is always a question of money in servicing something like this. You have to assess the value. And Wilfred Toms, that's Roger from the Positive Action Group, he's contacted us to remind us that February is World Radio Day, a day to celebrate radio as a medium, to improve international cooperation between broadcasters, and to encourage major networks and community radio alike to promote access to information, freedom of expression and gender equality over the airwaves. Well, there we are about that. In the news, well, there's not a huge amount. There's quite a lot of stories about, but for your comment, perhaps, what do you think of the idea of police drones? The newspapers called it Spy in the Sky, which is probably a little unfair, but nevertheless, the police are looking for an expression of interest for suppliers to set up a drone facility. Apparently it's true that significant more people this year are suffering from what they called Christmas hangover, Christmas debt hangover, that is, not alcohol, because of course they spent a great deal more than they really should have done. And a lot of this was done by more credit cards in some instances. That's where the debt comes in. And on the internet buying. So have you got any comments of that? And what about the encouragement that we've had from our various departments of government that get out of your car and walk to work? There we are. Well, there's 3 subjects to start off with, but I'm sure you'll produce many more yourself. And we'll take the first of them after the break.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Welcome back to the Mannin line. We've plenty of space on the programme today. Catherine is now talking to somebody on the phone, but we've plenty more space for your calls on 66 13 68. Texts, emails, texts 166 177, and emails to the studio, that is studio@manxradio.com. And our earlier programme had Mervyn Warner from the Public Media Alliance. He joined us from Norfolk, and we were talking about aspects of public service broadcasting, which is what Manx Radio does. In fact, this very programme is an example of public service broadcasting, which gives you, the listener, the chance to join in a number of different ways. Now, you're not doing so today, so let us hear from you, please. The topics are entirely open to you. We've got no particular restrictions today, whether it's something that's happened in the political scene, whether it's something that's going to happen, whether or not it's a social thing, whether you'd like to tell us about something that's happened and you agree with it or you don't agree with it, if you're even down to telling us about somebody's birthday, we'd be very pleased to hear from you on 66 13 68.
Country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain, Shenandoah River. Life is old there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, growing like a breeze. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads. All my memories gather round her, miner's lady, stranger to blue water, dark and dusty, painted on the sky, misty taste of moonshine, teardrop in my eye. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads. I hear her voice in the morning now, she calls me, the radio reminds me of my home far away, and driving down the road I get a feeling that I should have been home yesterday, yesterday. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads, country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads, take me home, country roads, take me home, country roads.
Oh yeah, that goes back a little, doesn't it? Olivia Newton-John and Country Roads. That, of course, takes us to country roads, really, at the moment. We have a lot of roads in the Isle of Man, and they're in various states of repair, from very good to pretty awful. What's your view on our road stock just at the moment? And have you got any ideas in any areas where you think that improvements should or could be made? In other words, what do you think of the Manx roads? Give us a call. 66 13 68 is the number. Now, we've got one or two texts and emails coming in here, but before we go on to those, there's another road, of course, that's coming into the news very much now, and that's the start of the redevelopment of the Douglas Promenade. And even so, even now, there are people who are, after all the years of debate about it, still questioning certain aspects of it, even though it's agreed. Now, the prom starts soon. You probably all by now know what the scheme is. Have you got any views on that as well? Let's hear about that. Not just the country roads, town roads, but also one for the prom and what's going to happen with it. Maria calls. She says, is there any chance we could have the House of Keys sitting on the television like the House of Commons is on the BBC? Well, I'll check with you at the moment, but there are some facilities for seeing what's going on in the Keys, and when Catherine returns, I'll have her check for me exactly what the current facilities are. So I'll be back with you in a little while, Maria, with some information. Simon wants to know was Daphne Kane invited to appear on the programme today? Well, no, she wasn't, because we were just simply dealing with historic issues and Manx Radio's historic issues on the public service broadcasting as it is now. She has been on the station already. I had a fairly long interview on the subject, and no doubt she will be back when the matter gets into the public arena, which it will do next Tuesday on Tuesday's Tin World. Now, we've got here as well a very long letter, which I think I will probably, under normal circumstances, might have not have time to read it all, but I have today. And this is from Martin Royal. And he says, "Hi Roger, my view is that without a public service broadcaster, the nation's identity will be threatened. There is a saying in Brittany that no language, no culture. And I would argue similarly that our culture will become threatened without a public service broadcaster. Manx Radio does not pump out material that I can listen to all of the time. It chooses its daytime music to please the maximum number across the nation, and sometimes, through the blandness of its choices, in danger of pleasing no one. However, its news and spoken word programmes are, in my view, excellent and very greatly missed, and a very greatly assist to our perception of our nation. We have some excellent journalists at Manx Radio. I would suggest that presenters such as John Moss, Beth Espy and James Davis will be able to hold their own in combative areas such as the Today programme on the UK's BBC Radio 4. They are of that quality, and we're very lucky to have the likes of them bring us news and current affairs. Of course, things are said at times that I disagree with, but overall, I've tried in the general integrity of and trust in the general integrity of the current operation and output. The station does its best to walk a thin line. There may be pressure to see Tynwald. This is just to read from a distance. There may be pressure to toe Tynwald's line, but I feel that it does the best to avoid this. We must value our public service broadcaster and support it fully. Yes, it could be better, dare I say better funded, but our nation would be much the poorer without it. The alternative is wall-to-wall pipe music and inane chatter. On balance, that will not serve democracy or the nation well at all. I can add that I have no personal interest in Manx Radio. None of my relatives work there, and I believe that its public service role should be supported." Well, that's a very long and very kind letter. Thank you, Martin. One or two more emails have now come in. This one's from Larry and Harry. He is complaining about censorship shown and a pretty rough deal for Paul Moulton by the Chief Minister. I don't know what this is about, by Manx Public via YouTube, and he believes it infuriating, and he doesn't think that this, it's a long, complicated letter, but he's talking about disagreeing with political censorship. Well, I think we'd all would agree with that, Larry, or Harry, whichever one of you has written it, and he just doesn't understand what Tynwald's debaters are scared of. I don't get it. The censorship on an epic scale. Well, I'm not too sure what that is all about, folks. So all I can say to you is that if you want to explain it a bit more, maybe you can. But what we'll do now is we'll wait for one or two more of your calls. And in doing that, we'll take a break.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
And welcome back to our Mannin line. Let me just remind you, if you haven't heard me say it enough already, that our telephone lines, all of them are open, and the number is 66 13 68. Catherine will immediately answer your call, and we also, or almost immediately, and we also can take your texts and emails on 166177, or we can also take them by email on studio@manxradio.com. But your telephone calls are extremely welcome. And indeed, our first caller is on the line today, and that's our old friend, Stuart Mackenzie. Good afternoon, Stuart.
Good afternoon, Roger. You seem to be struggling a little, so I thought I'd chuck in a few pennies worth. And it was just to mention on the public broadcasting approach. I mean, the Manx Radio is moving into using modern social media, and I just have this caveat to say is that, professionals, I hope I can still say that, like myself, are somewhat wary of the Facebooks and Twitters of this world, because we're fairly sure that they will be subject to a massive hack at some point in time. Not now, not next week, but sometime, because there's a lot of concentration on the naughty people out there who see it as an absolute target which they should hack. And once it's hacked, you'll have a backlash from a lot of people, coming back on it, because the idea of the profiles is to garner as much information about a person as possible. So that makes you, quite open to difficulties, shall we say.
Yeah, well, of course, it has all of these technology all over the years, hasn't it, Stuart? Has had its advantages and disadvantages. You were in on the very early days of the internet and of emails.
Well, yes, I suppose I was the person who brought the internet to the island, so yes, I've been wary all the time. And it's perhaps noticeable, for example, that I'm not on LinkedIn, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on Facebook. And you would obviously ask the question, well, if you've been involved so long, why are you not? And the answer to that is because I'm paranoid.
Well, of course, you are, and indeed so am I, of a generation that perhaps wouldn't instantly think of going to your phone to get the news. But nevertheless, there is a whole generation of people who do and get great value out of that.
Yes, that's true. And I mean, as far as the PSP side of it is concerned, I've always been supportive of Manx Radio, and I think that they do an excellent job. And when there is the criticism quite often on the forums to say that Manx Radio is in the pocket of the government, I've never found that at all. I've always found that they're quite critical when it needs to be critical, and long may it continue.
Well, I know you've joined us on more than one radio programme over the years, and Stuart, and I would ask you this question. I know what the answer is going to be, but nevertheless will ask it. Have you ever had anybody lean on you to say something or not to say something?
No, never when it's been with respect to the radio. I have when I was representing the DTI, and I was going to London to have some discussions about fibre optics, and I wasn't leaned on, but I was made clear that the position of the government was X, Y, and Z, and so that's fair enough. I mean, I was being paid, so that's only right that you should do that, but never when it's with respect to the radio.
Right. So what do you make then of the current debate that's here we go again, I think, well, maybe here we go again, we don't know, but where the subject seems to come round again? I will go back to the issue of age, perhaps. We get a strong sense of déjà vu with all this, don't we?
And I certainly do, and I think it's mistaken at this point in time. You have to remember Daphne Kane is, of course, a new member, and therefore wasn't involved with the previous stuff with Ronan was the chairman, wasn't he? But I think that's given time. It takes time for legislation to come through, and if they did adopt the 12 recommendations, then they should give them time to have that come through.
Some of them are being amended, and one or two of them were not really all that important, but there were 3 or 4 main ones there. One interesting one was to adopt the European Union's recommendation for public service broadcasting as well as the sort of standard. Which is
yes, but we're not in the European Union, are we? And the funny thing about the European Union is that if I'd been in the UK, I would have voted I would have voted to leave if I'd been in the UK. When I'm in the Isle of Man, I'm not sure that that's the right the right answer. You look after what's best for yourself, don't you?
Indeed you do. All right, Stuart, well, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
How's the Ramsey Pier going?
Oh, the pier's good. We just restarted yesterday, and we've got the money for Bay 1, and hopefully we'll order the steel very shortly. And you will find that you can buy a plank next month, February the 1st, I think it launches, and donate that and have a plaque on the pier. That would be a good thing, I think.
Right, okay. Then
Okay.
thanks for joining us.
Okay, now, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Now, speaking in 2012, the head of RTE, then head Claire Dignan, very, very clearly made sure to tell us that RTE have had their ups and downs in funding too. And she had this to say at the time about the new world of not just digital broadcasting, but the fact that other people's transmissions can be heard in your territory via the internet, and yours can be heard by other people, as indeed Manx radios are.
Actually, radio is probably the oldest electronic communication medium that there is, but we've benefited hugely from the advent of digital technology. And I think whereas long ago when I was growing up, radio was something that you listened to at home on a device in the corner of the kitchen plugged into electrical mains, really what digital technology has allowed us to do is make radio a product and a service that people can access anywhere, anytime, on any form of platform they want. I remember when the first Walkmans came in, and that was just for music and for pre-recorded music. It seemed extraordinary at the time, but now you can be on a bus or on a train going to work. You can be either listening to live radio on your phone, you could be listening on your laptop, you could be listening back to a great interview that you missed from 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's just making radio a ubiquitous medium that serves people's needs wherever they are and whenever they are, and I think that's fantastic.
Is there difficulties, because obviously you trained in a different era where there was layers of editors and layers of fact checking on things? We all have to provide much more content, and RTE radios provide much more content, less people. Will the quality get watered down, or how do you deal with those sort of questions?
I think the integrity of your product is the most important thing, more so today in a digital world where there is so much choice. People have hundreds and thousands of sources of content to choose from, but time and again what they will do is come back to the product and the brand that they associate with quality and integrity, and particularly in a world of journalism, with truth and accuracy. So for us, the RTE brand across all our platforms, that message has to be about high quality. So if it's about radio content, it's really important that we keep up the quality and the integrity of what we offer to listeners. Where they then choose to consume it, whether they're listening on a cable TV channel in bed or they're listening on their laptop or wherever that is, the brand of RTE and the messages that are associated with that about quality and truth and trust, that's the most important thing.
That was Claire Dignan. She was the former director of RTE Radio. Now, it's interesting, there's some comments, but it just shows you that the issues surrounding the media is the same whichever country you go to, really. And we'd still like to hear your views on the Isle of Man's media. It doesn't necessarily just mean newspapers. Radio, you can talk about newspapers as well. I have here a comment which says that our correspondent's concern was the items that are presented as news, which implies it's been researched and verified by the station, whereas they're propaganda statements from a department. So when that's the case, it should be made clear that it's a department statement which has not been verified by the station. Well, I don't know about verified, but it is quite common practice to say that, a press release or report or comment from, they don't usually hold it out quite as the station's own research. It inevitably is tagged in some way to show that it had been sent through from government. Now, let's see, we have another caller on the line, and it's another name which is familiar to us, Peter Verstach. Hello, Peter.
Yes, hi, Roger. I'd like to talk, please, about the answer to the Freedom of Information request that was made to Department of Enterprise about cruise passengers. They've come back, as published in the Independent this week, saying that the spend per head of cruise passengers is £45. That's not actually the question that was asked. The question that was asked was, what is the value of a cruise passenger to the Isle of Man? And that's something which is very different. For example, a cruise passenger goes into a shop in Strand Street, which is owned by a UK company, and he spends £50 on a pair of trainers, which were made in Bangladesh or South Korea. There's no tax paid by the shop because it's a UK company. There's no benefit to the Isle of Man economy because the trainers were made abroad, they were imported, as are so many of the things available on the high street. So where's the benefit, and how can one justify spending £50 million on a cruise terminal to attract them?
Well, we had this debate, didn't we, a few weeks ago?
We did, but we didn't get this answer from government, and in fact they've not answered the question. They've answered the question they wanted to answer, not the question that was put to them.
Well, in Orkneys, you heard our friend from the Orkneys who seemed to be fairly satisfied that although perhaps the individual spend of the individual cruise tourist wasn't all that great, it added up to something worth having.
Actually, yeah. it was about £15 in Orkney, I think.
Yeah. It did add up because they had the volume.
Well, but they didn't. They already had the terminal. They didn't have to build it.
That's true.
They got some EU money to do some work to it, but they didn't have to raise the 50 million. What's interesting is that on the response to this request of freedom of information request, they did actually point to a study produced by Treasury 5 years ago called the Cruise Passenger Survey 2013. And the figure which was given then of the benefit to the Exchequer in the Isle of Man per cruise passenger was £4.65.
Right.
So, and that's broadly in line with an earlier report given to Tynwald by the Standing Committee on Economic Initiatives in 2010, which is available on the Tynwald website, incidentally, and that put the figure at £5 per passenger. So, if we're talking about £4 or £5 benefit per passenger, you need an awful lot of tourists to cover 50 million.
Indeed you do. Well, of course, it hasn't happened yet, and it hasn't been really gone to any further stages yet, has it? And the ships are coming, and their people are being tendered in, although the ship companies don't
That's
like
right.
that.
I think we probably got the right number now, and I don't think we want to be swamped with millions and millions of them. It'll frighten away the traditional tourists who come, the people who come on homestay and so on. They don't want to be swamped in all the tourist sites. Anyway, you know my position.
Indeed.
I just thought I'd bring it up again.
Well, thank you for doing so, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Roger.
Bye-bye. Right, that was Peter Verstash there. When you have these MHKs on Manx Radio, we never have a balanced view, just one-sided. Well, I think I know what you mean there. I don't know who this is, actually. There's no name on it. But yes, when it's in an interview format for the news, that is quite true. And when it's in a discussion format on this programme, that's probably true. The only sort of checks and balances really is the presenter, me or whoever. But Sunday Opinion is a programme with a history of bringing in various people and discussing with the MHKs and officials a subject and bringing in others who don't share the same view. And now, as we've got past the honeymoon period of our new government and new parliament, we'll be doing that in Sunday Opinion where necessary over the next months and years, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. It will happen. Vernon called to say that his wife recently spent some time in hospital, and the treatment at Nobles was exceptionally good, but there were about 4 blood pressure machines on the ward, and wherever they went, when they went to use one, it didn't work. So they're now talking about spending 21 million on the promenade when there are machines at the hospital which need replacing, and they're not being replaced. That was the point. Well, very interesting comment. Of course, the hospital is never ending, isn't it, in its demand. This is one of the problems of providing a top health service. You talk about spending 21 million on the promenade, and also talk about government press releases, as our earlier correspondent was. But there's one here dated the 10th of January, which is from the Department of Infrastructure, and it says it's submitted, this goes back to the prom, its planning application for the redevelopment of Douglas Promenade. Subject to approval being granted, work will start in September to rejuvenate the area widely regarded as the gateway to the Isle of Man. The planning application features a new design for the southern section of the promenade to improve traffic flow, junctions and footpaths. The northern end will be developed on a simple like-for-like basis. The scheme, which gained overwhelming support from Tynwald members in 2017, also includes the creation of a cultural area around the Villa Marina and Gaiety, and this in line with the Douglas Master Plan, and will connect the prom with the town centre. The work is required to address the promenade's crumbling infrastructure and will involve the full-depth excavation and reconstruction of the failing highway and drainage, as well as the installation of new water and gas mains and ducting. Horse trams will be relaid to reflect the design principle agreed by Tynwald, with twin tracks retained in the centre of the road from the terminal at Strathallan to a point just north of the Broadway junction. Then they cross to the seaward side of the highway and switch to a single track. The promenade proposals were on display and well received by the department and so on. Infrastructure Minister Ray Harmer said the submission of planning applications is a further milestone towards our vision for the future of Douglas. Well, there we are. When somebody earlier on asked what actually is going on with the promenade there it is. And that's what's happening. Now, we've got plenty of texts and emails today, but not a lot of phone calls, please. 66 13 68 is the number for you to ring. Now, who is this one from? Oh, Barry, our good old friend Barry, who I think now listens to us in Cheltenham. Good afternoon, Barry. He says it's time for some pedantry. The internet is almost like taking radio back to its original transmission format. The original radio was delivered to your home by way of wires. You sat in a cabinet listening to it on earphones. Marconi was credited with inventing the radio set up in his factory in Chelmsford, Essex, about 1901, and it's still there, Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company. Signs around the town say Chelmsford, home of the radio. About 7 or 8 years ago, Marconi's daughter, Elettra Marconi, came to Chelmsford to unveil some memorial or other, and she saw the signs about Marconi and basically said, he didn't invent radio, he invented a means of transmission without wires. He invented the wireless. Older folks still refer to listening to the wireless. Maybe Manx Radio, transmitting and transmitted through the internet, should be called Manx Wireless. I must try to get out more. Okay, Barry, thank you for that. Good to hear from you. Now, we have another caller on the line, and it's Eddie. Good afternoon to you, Eddie.
Good afternoon. We're going to spend £22 million, I believe, on the promenade.
Uh-huh.
What are we going to do to the seawall? As you know, every time we have a gale, southeasterly, easterly, we have overtopping, especially by the War Memorial, where you're going to spend all this money. Mm. You're going to have stones, seaweed, sand coming right across.
Okay, keep going. So what you're saying is the changes will not, won't make things better from that point of view, make them worse. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, you're spending a lot of money on the surface, but nothing for the seawall itself.
Yeah. But they talk
seawall
about...
is in a terrible state if you go along and have a look at it.
I don't know where the seawall, whether it comes into this or not. I'm just going back to this here. Work is required to address the problem's crumbling infrastructure, full depth excavation and reconstruction of the highway and drainage. Well, maybe so, because the large chunk of the promenade, when it was built, was on reclaimed land, wasn't it?
Yeah, all of it. Mm. I worked for the corporation many years ago on the low level, and the water goes all the way right back to Backstrand Street, where the cliffs face is originally.
Yes, indeed. Well, the little
and
tiny bit of...
every time it goes in, every time you get your tide coming in,
yeah,
it takes sand and stuff back out as it ebbs.
Okay.
So unless you do something to the sea wall, your promenade is always going to be bumps and lumps all the way along it, because it's every time there's a movement underneath. So unless you do something to the sea wall itself, you're not going to stop that, are you?
A good point. My father used to have a shop in Castle Street, and at the equinox tides, his basement stock basement, everything was up on shelves because the stock basement used to get flooded. That was in Castle Street.
Yeah, all the way along there. When they went and put the new Loch Church in, everything was held up for about 2 months because they went below the waterline.
Right.
And they went home one day, came back, and there was a swimming pool the next.
Yeah. Well, another problem's arising around the town like that at the moment. People are altering buildings and they're forgetting that there's wells underneath them.
Yeah. Well, all the way. You go along the south and North Quay. I mean, lots of those houses there have got a sump in the back.
Yes. You
know, where the water goes and then goes away again.
Soak away, yes.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for joining us, Eddie.
Okay, thanks. Pleasure, mate.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Hannah's written in. She says, "Hi, my name is Hannah and I'm from Belfast. And I just wanted to say that I listen to Manx Radio every day, and I have my radio at home and in the car tuned to Manx Radio. I don't listen to any of my local stations, as I found Manx Radio offers a better selection of listening than my local stations. There is a great variety of listening topics and genres of music, something for everyone, and I personally hope to see Manx Radio still around in another 50 years' time, and I'm looking forward to my next visit to the island." And that's a comment from Hannah. Michael Starkey, he says it's probably been already mentioned, but is there any plans to turn the station digital, as it's sometimes difficult to get a decent signal? Well, there's been discussions I do know about using a digital platform for some time now, Michael, and I think eventually things will come to pass. But again, it's one of these things where there's a significant cost involved in it. So, we'll have to see how that happens and where we go to with it. Now, what else have we got here? Some more comments. I've listened to Manx Radio over the years, and when there's a crisis like the weather and the snow, then it's a way of helping people out, giving them information. My father fought in a world war to secure free speech. I think it'd be a shame if we lost that. Keep doing the good work you do. And then, what else have we got? We've got quite a few here now. Could someone explain how the bungalows in Williston are having the asbestos taken out while the tenants are still living in the property? They're corporation properties. Yours, Christina. Well, obviously, Christina, I can't answer that, but anybody listening might be able to. What else have we got? Please, DHSC confirm 278 Meals on Wheels users. Yes, then it's reported some are in residential nursing homes, so how can the DHSC figures be trusted, says Andy. Robin Peel called. The last called and said they needed to assess the value of each individual passenger from cruise ships. That was Peter, I think you were talking about, but I don't think that's really possible. The crew of these ships come ashore as well, and listening to the chap from Orkney, they are the biggest spenders. So just asking the passengers what they spend wouldn't give you an accurate picture of the value of the cruise ships to the economy. And then, what's the point in making the pavement wider? I think he means on the prom. Pointless and senseless. It's like Muppets making decisions. Well, there we are. That's all the texts and emails that we have in here just at the moment, and we've dealt with all the callers. And we just have about 3 minutes to go on the programme, so let me go back to remind you that we still have time to take a quicker call if you'd like to ring us on 66 13 68. And we would like to hear some of your views and comments about Manx Radio, because sometimes when you work within an organisation, when you're doing as I'm doing today, making a programme, and Catherine is out there waiting for your calls, and she's also the producer of our earlier programme. We get quite involved in making the programme, but we're not always absolutely certain your reaction to it, and we'd like to hear more of that. So there's plenty of means of contacting us at the station here through all sorts of media these days. Now, that's that. Next week, we will not what we're doing next week, I don't know yet. We'll be able to see what we're... because, of course, as this is a current affairs programme, we very often work very tight to the actual topic that's out in the public domain at the moment. So we'll be able to tell you very shortly. And we would like also suggestions from you on what you would like to hear on programmes. We've had one today indirectly which says that they'd like to hear more debate with people who don't necessarily agree with the members of the House of Keys. Well, that's fine. We bring people in with differences of opinion, and indeed that's how the programme got its first name all the way back there in 1977 when it was called Sunday Opinion. Now, Albert has contacted us. She says, no, he says, which is quite true what he says here. The crew of the cruise ships in Orkney were big spenders, but only in the charity shops. Well, that was a point that did come up in that programme, Albert. You're quite right. But it'd be nice to see what people would do in the cruise industry and the benefits we would get out of it. But nevertheless, it's a very big business now, and people are always looking for somewhere new to go. I've got a holiday brochure came through, tucked inside one of the newspapers yesterday, and within the newspaper itself, and it was quite interesting to find that on page 3 or 4 there was a full railways holiday in the Isle of Man, which offered you air tickets, it offered you 4 days accommodation, half board, and it offered you rides on all the stations and all the trains, I should say, on all the trains, and it was going to cost £440. So the Isle of Man is starting to appear on many of these places where people might come for a holiday. Well, I'm just coming to the end of the programme now. Let me ask you once more that Catherine and I would be very pleased to hear from you about any topics that you would like to see in the programme. And the telephone number to ring in other programmes to contact us is the same as this one today. And of course you can always email the station. Well, Catherine and I will be back again next week at the same time with another Sunday Opinion and another Mannin Line. But until then, from both of us, I hope you have a good weekend and goodbye.